this whole thing, everything that is happening to us, I think it's an opportunity for, it is truly an opportunity for a great reset. And so it just depends on us, right? How do we see it? Do we see it as a big challenge or do we see it as an opportunity?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the People Hum interview series. This is your host Neha at People Hum. People Hum is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and channel that receives more than 200,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. We have with us today Marina Cvetkovic. Marina is a seasoned leadership advisor and executive coach with 10 plus senior business expertise working for world's leading organizations. Her expertise is in accelerating performances of executives and top teams through executive coaching, leadership alliance programs for top teams, and next-gen advisory for executives and top teams. We're very thrilled to be getting in conversation with her today. Welcome, Marina. Welcome to People Hum.
Thank you, Sneha, for having me.
It's great having you here. So to jump right into the conversation, you're the co-CEO at Nicole Hyman & Partners, the world's leading experts in leadership alliances. So could you share some more about the great work that you do there and your experience along the way?
Sure. Yes. It's been an interesting journey. I have been part of the organization for half a year or so now, and Nicole has been a colleague and peer and a friend for some time longer than that. We were both part of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches community, and it is obviously a great community to tap into also for business partnerships. And so that's how, Nicole and I crossed paths and decided to partner up and in fact, share the CEO role essentially equally. The work that we do, and which is why Nicole and I came together in the first place, is I have always been focusing on, top teams and advising them and then coaching them in the past few years. And Nicole has pretty much done the same, in her own business. And so we said, okay, it seems like we are serving the same, audience, the same market. And wouldn't it be great to just join forces and do this together? And so it's very exciting. It is work that feels very aligned with my mission, and our work is centered around the leadership alliance concept. And I think you and I kind of discussed about that briefly before, but it's essentially this idea that top teams are so important in any organization, whether it's a board or a management team. And yet most of them are not perfectly aligned, right? There is quite some room, to do more work on aligning them more and creating a stronger leadership alliance that would then essentially, accelerate also business performance, right? And it could be strengthening the alliance within the management team, it could be strengthening the alliance within the board, or the alliance between the two, right? Or perhaps even between the management team and the minus one. So that's the focus of our work essentially. And now we do this work through different formats, right? I think lately in the pandemic, one thing that has been more popular than ever, I would say, is also just simple kind of keynote speaking virtually. I think a lot of teams are looking for ways to get inspired again and excited again, and doing keynotes, interactive keynotes with teams has been a great way to do that in the pandemic. And then certainly, our full Leadership Alliance programs, which are a combination of working with the team, but then also working with every individual leader as well. as well as executive coaching. So there's different formats in which we live and breathe and do this work, but it's always with the same purpose of, transforming the top of the organization to transform the rest of the organization and ultimately also accelerate business performance.
Sounds very interesting, and I love how you're doing this with your best friend, because I'm sure that must increase the fun manyfold. And at the same time, I just want to mention that what you're doing is amazing, because this is the need of the hour. So that's amazing. It's very interesting to hear about that. You hold expertise in executive coaching. So is there a certain set of challenges when it comes to coaching leaders who hold concrete views that have existed for a long period of time?
Oh. Show me a leader that doesn't have that, right?
Right.
I think all of us have it, and the more experienced and arguably the more senior we are, the more established we are in our own way of thinking and also in our own way of leading, right? And so that's exactly the opportunity for coaching, right? Because what happens often in the leadership development and career kind of progress journey is we continue growing by playing our strengths, right? And by kind of pushing forward. And at some point, as Marshall would famously say, is like, what got us here won't get us there, right? And there's that turning point where actually the exact things that brought us success and brought us progress until now is the very thing that we need to shift, right? And sometimes exactly to the opposite, right? So one of the common things is, when we're rather kind of early in our career, we need to know it all, and we need to know as much as we can and demonstrate our knowledge and our expertise. And at some point, knowing it all is a disadvantage. If we know it all and we're trying to lead and empower people to grow and develop, it's definitely, something that is not really serving us anymore, right? So, and I would say, the number one step is definitely, making them realize, there is a need for change, right? Which is counterintuitive, because most leaders at that point are still quite successful, right? And yet again, they don't have what it takes for the success of tomorrow. Right?
Okay.
So, making them understand how the journey looks like, right? And showing them what the journey could look like in the future and why that change is needed. And then that opens door, right? That opens the door for transformation, that opens the door for, personal kind of self-growth and development, but also the door for the coaching to really have that powerful impact, right? That we wanted to have in the first place.
Like you mentioned, there are certain belief systems that are very hard to shake off. And definitely when it comes to leaders, they're all the more difficult, because they are used to a certain environment and a certain way of working. But like you also mentioned that, change is something that, at the risk of sounding cliched, it's the only constant. And we have understood that now more than ever because of the pandemic. So it's definitely, I would urge all of our listeners and viewers to consider coaching at some point in their journey, because it's supposed to help them. So I definitely say that. And your work focuses on the top of the pyramid in any organization. So my question to you is, why start there?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's interesting, and there's different philosophies and different theories on where we should start. Should it be a bottom up? Should it be a top down? Should we start from the middle and somehow cascade up and down? What's the best way to transform an organization? And to be very honest, my reason why, most of it is also because I ask myself, where do I feel like I can serve the best, right? And when I look back at my career, I've always been, advising senior executives of large, international or global organizations, and so that's what I know, right? That's what I feel really familiar with, really comfortable with. And so it makes, it made perfect sense, when we think about coaching and leadership alliance work, to start there, because in many ways the doors were already open for me. I speak the language, I understand the landscape, I understand the challenges. And that is huge when you are approaching someone for relatively deep work, right? Whether it's one-on-one executive coaching or leadership alliance, there is that certain level of trust and comfort that a client needs to feel, even just to begin the journey. And I felt like, most of my clients that feel that with me are actually there, and it makes perfect sense. But then, of course, there is the other side of the equation, which is I do believe that the culture of the organization is set at the top. And we've seen examples of organizations who put out all these like shiny, very nice values out there and principles and all of that. But then when we look at the leadership team, we don't necessarily see them living that, right? Day in and day out. And so what happens is that if they're not role modeling that, then the -1 is not role modeling that. And so it's really hard then for someone further down in the organization to all of a sudden become a pioneer and a big role model, and really start living and breathing those. So that's the basic kind of assumption of our work, that we do believe that it starts there, and it has to start there.
It's absolutely amazing. I feel like role models are very essential in every aspect of the workspace. Even if you want to really work on yourself as an individual, I feel like that's a great way to start. So thanks a lot for that. I'm sure that our viewers and listeners have a lot to think about right now.
I hope so.
Yeah. So could you tell us more about your Leadership Alliance program?
Oh, sure. Yes. So let me see. So without going into too much detail, but basically, the model is, or the process, I would say, consists out of, defining what are the factors that basically make a leadership alliance strong, right? And we've identified 5 factors that, in our experience, when all of those 5 are strong, we can say that the team is quite aligned and that there is a true leadership alliance. And those factors are the mission, the vision, the working together principles, behaviors, and mindsets. Now, at the same time, what we are observing is that in most organizations, and then also leadership teams, the mission and the vision are the two that are often somewhat there, so there is, usually an organization has a mission and a vision. Then the question is, does the leadership team have their own, within that, which is not often the case. But let's say there is at least something there to start. And that's where we usually hear our clients say, well, we feel really good about that piece, right? So that's a piece that, you kind of start with, and that's our anchor in a way to say, okay, at least there is something there. But then the piece that is mostly missing, which is the true alignment around how do we want to work together? What are those principles that we're going to honor? What are the mindsets that we are going to bring to the table when we come together? And how does that manifest in terms of the behaviors that we will exhibit? Right? And so those 3 we've seen very rarely, that a leadership team or a management team or a board has had explicit conversations about, right? And those 3 are super important. And what happens is that often leaders make assumptions, right? Based on what they're observing are acceptable behaviors, based on what they're observing are kind of like the accepted mindsets to bring to the conversation, and they adopt that. So what happens is, whether we want it or not, intentionally or unintentionally, we do create a culture, right? It's just that it may be a culture that is not necessarily supportive of, creating a leadership alliance, right? And so What we want is for teams to become more aware, and for for leaders to be more explicit about all of these three factors, right? And to have a conversation around it, right? And make it something that they explicitly agreed upon, right? As opposed to having it be something that is implied and unwritten, and everyone has their own assumptions around, but actually no one is really truly aligned about what it is. Because that's a missed opportunity, and that's where the misalignment often happens, and a missed opportunity to ultimately generate a much better business performance as well.
I feel like I'm sure that it must have not started out as a scientific approach towards it. But when you look at it that way, that is definitely a very scientific approach. And I also love what you said about cultures, because very often we are so biased towards things. How do we realize we're biased? We don't. So that's all that happens very subconsciously. So what you just mentioned can also help a lot in doing away with stereotypes. So that's amazing. That's absolutely very inspiring.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next thing that I want to ask you is that empathy is being talked about a lot in light of the pandemic. And as a coach, do you think that leaders have been practicing it enough to make a difference? And what other advice would you give them to cope in this post-pandemic era?
Yeah, it's a big one, right? And
It's a big
you're
one.
right. Everyone is talking about it, and it's very interesting, because when you ask me, like, are they doing enough? I would say they think they're doing enough, but they're not doing enough. Okay, so I think that's my answer. And why do I say that? I say that because all of us as leaders, we have blind spots, right? And we may think we're putting so much effort into showing high empathy and really being there for our employees, and being there also for them as humans, right? But as they say, the beauty is in the eye of the observer, right? It really depends on how is that being perceived,
Right.
Do our employees really perceive like they're being taken care of, like there is empathy in place? And oftentimes when we run assessments, or even just stakeholder interviews, leaders are shocked, because it turns out somehow their efforts do not translate into what they would hope that they would translate into. And so it's really important as a leader to find a way to get that input, right, back from your team, to say, hey, how am I doing? And what happens often, ironically, is that leaders do so much that they feel like they're almost being intrusive. So they stop, right? They hold back from asking more questions on how you are and how is your family and is everyone safe and healthy and all of that, because they think it would be too much. And then when they do a 360, they find out that it's not too much. Their teams want more of that, and they need more of that, right? As an example, And so I would say, without saying what is enough or not enough, your people decide, and you need to ask them and understand where they're at and understand how much they need, because also not everyone needs the same, and that's where the empathy comes in, right? Having that interpersonal sensitivity to understand, what does this human being really need? What level of care, what level of support, and so on and so forth.
Definitely, that's very insightful. And I feel like one of the best ways to be empathetic is to step into somebody else's shoes, or maybe just walk up to them and ask them what they require. So I feel like that's definitely very valuable advice. Thanks a lot. Yeah. And lastly, Marina, do you have any passing remarks for us?
I would say if I would say one thing, then I would definitely say this whole thing, everything that is happening to us, I think it is truly an opportunity for a great reset. And so it just depends on us, right? How do we see it? Do we see it as a big challenge, or do we see it as an opportunity? And I would encourage everyone, while I acknowledge that we're all dealing with challenges, right? Of course, to tap into that opportunity at the same time, because it is definitely there. No matter what is happening, there is always, every challenge creates an opportunity at the same time. It's just that our human brain operates in a way to protect us. So we are tapping into managing the challenge instead of really leveraging the opportunity. So that would be my one advice.
Absolutely amazing. Very valuable advice. And I don't think we could have ended this interview on a better note than that. Thanks a lot, Marina. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having you over at Leaders Hum. And I wish you a great day ahead.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for
Bye
having me.
bye.
Bye.